Hello everyone, my name is Barbara and I would like to welcome you all to our latest Knowledge webinar episode. This week, discover what's new in ZBrush4 Release 7. Pixologic's own Paul Gaboury will take us on a tour through ZBrush4 Release 7. It will be covering all of the new exciting features which include ZModeler, ArrayMesh, NanoMesh, and the ZBrush to Keyshot Bridge. He's even going to share a couple other additional features that you may not have been aware of. So this is Paul. Paul works for Pixologic, helping to bring the next generation of sculpting software to the world. He has trained at nearly every major film and game company and has developed training programs for university and educational institutions around the globe. Before we get going, here's an overview of what we do at Knowledge. Knowledge is one of the largest online stores for design software. We offer a huge assortment of software solutions that cater to virtually every designer's need. Put us to the test and come visit our webpage at knowledge.com. And for more daily software news and limited time promotions, pay a visit to the Knowledge blog and follow us on Facebook, Google+, and Twitter. Coming up next week, Rhino with V-Ray, engagement ring, prototype, and render. Follow the creation of a traditional engagement suite from model to export to render. Last but not least, today's webinar is free and is being recorded live. If you want to watch this or any webinar episode in our collection, just head over to Knowledge's YouTube and Vimeo channels. And now, Paul, I'm going to share your screen and take it away, and it's showtime for you.
All right. We have 1 hour, you said?
Yes.
All right. So everyone should see ZBrush. Right now, Joseph, Los Angeles is definitely still Narnia. So you were good to calling Los Angeles Narnia, because it is. So I'm with you on this one. Alex is asking about ArrayMesh. Yeah, we're going to try and touch on that. Obviously, there's a lot of new stuff. So I can't spend a lot on ArrayMesh, but there is a video on our website of talking about ArrayMesh to get you going to the basics, and we're working on some more videos. I know there's like another 5 videos going up possibly today or tomorrow on our website. So Joseph's been cranking a lot of videos out within the last month, so he's continuing to make more. In fact, I just talked to him. He's recording some more as we speak. So we definitely, I'll cover a little bit of that. And so really the big points I want to hit is the ZModeler brush. I want to hit a little bit of some Array and some Nano. I definitely want to talk about the new feature in ZRemesher because it solves two big things that everybody was asking for. I just don't see a lot of people playing with it, though, right now, or maybe they're playing with it and they're not putting it on ZBrush Central. So I definitely want to make sure people are aware that we worked on the ZRemesher to solve the two things that people are asking for. No more spirals. So the new ZRemesher does not have spirals in it anymore. And also it handles hard surface a ton better than the original ZRemesher did. So I kind of want to show we added a new option to even help that hard surfacing more. So I want to show that, and that's when I'll bring one of Vitali's pieces to show that off. So by all means, feel free to fire away questions within the question section here of the GoToMeeting. I'll be keeping an eye on that as I'm working within ZBrush. So everyone can see my screen all right, and then what about the frame rate? Everyone's good on that? So it's just these missiles pretty much going from the left of the screen to the right of the screen. Everything good on your guys' side? Okay, Francis, you can't hear. Can anybody else having any hearing problems? Everyone can hear me though, right?
I think so.
So Francis, yeah, Francis, it might be something on Francis' side. You might have to message me. Okay. So what I really want to start with is the ZModeler brush and the dynamic one. So this is something I started making in the very beginning process of R7 and when we started making the ZModeler brush. So when I started this, it wasn't what it is today, and that's the point, is we start thinking about different ways to do things, and like myself, Joseph, and Tomal, and some other people within the company start trying to make something that maybe, hey, I probably wouldn't have attempted to make this before, but now that we got this brush, let's really push this brush and see what I can accomplish with it. So I decided, you know what, to start making this whole airplane and everything, because it's something normally people wouldn't try to do in ZBrush. Then I started, you know, I really want to make some accessories. So these are the missiles from the plane that I'm working on. accessory. So the key thing in here is you can see how low polygon it is as well. So everything here is extremely low in as far as the polygons go. Okay? So the overall total points of every single subtool here is 257,000 polygons. So I've got 12 subtools. Okay? So this is obviously very harsh. So what we can do is we have a new dynamic subdiv mode, which is really beneficial to be able to work on now something that looks subdivided and be able to use features specifically that you weren't able to use before with subdivision levels, like the slice brushes, and you can now use them with the dynamic subdiv. So now you can see I put this all in a dynamic subdiv, so we've got a nice representation of this as far as being a nice smooth surface, but my polygon count isn't changing. So in all actuality, even though it looks like it's subdivided, it's really not. It's more of like a preview. So I kind of want to touch base on this and find out what this is doing so you guys can really see what's going on. So pretty much everything for the most part you're seeing here through this entire piece was all started from a cube. Pretty much all of it. Like this is a insert mesh brush along a curve that I made. That bolt right there is from the train insert mesh brush that I made years ago. So I tend to reuse a lot of stuff over and over and over again, right? So clearly, obviously, this was started from a cylinder, the missiles themselves. But pretty much most of the stuff here is from a basic shape, whether it be a cylinder or a cube. So I found myself in hard surfacing with ZBrush always wanting to do that. I always wanted to start from just a simple shape. So what we've added new to this version as well is a way for you guys to quickly create a shape, whether it be a cube, a sphere, or a cylinder. So now every mesh, regardless if it's a poly mesh, okay? So on the top here you have your 3D primitives. So these are things that are kind of like more of a mathematical equation figuring out stuff. So we wanted something more to give you quick ways to make some default pieces. So everything now has an initialized state. So you can see if I have a mesh, in this sense it's the poly mesh that I have selected. So it doesn't matter what I have. If I come in the Lightbox and I start loading even the dog or the head or the Demo Soldier, you're now going to have an initialized state here. So you can see we can make a cube really quick, right? So you see this function saying, hey, you've got subdivision levels. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete them because I don't need them, right? And then I'm going to say cube it. So you can see I now have a cube, right? And I can control my spans with these sliders. So let's say I'm making something that's more like a column of some kind of architectural piece that's maybe going to go in a video game or a film. I can say, hey, I need in the Y resolution to be a little bit taller, so I'm going to say 5 and cube it, and you see now it's got 5 spans going up, 2 and 2 for the X and the Z, right? And then I can do the same thing with a sphere. So you can see it's an elongated sphere. Maybe there's going to be some kind of jewel or something that's going to go on my character. And then the benefit is I can just change this stuff on the fly and then hit the button again. I can go, hey, I want it actually as a cylinder, and now I've got a cylinder. And if I want it taller, of course, all I have to do is now say how many spans do I want, and then cylinder along the Y. So, of course, now turning on the floor, you can see that this cylinder's height is along the Y because I hit cylinder Y. So you can see if I hit cylinder X, it comes this way. Cylinder Z, it's going that way. So we created this new start point because I found it very useful for me to start with a cube a lot of times, just even something like this, okay? And I might start with even deciding what spans I wanted. So let's just start with something simpler. Let's just start with actually one-sided face cube, right? So in essence, it's just 6 faces. All right, let's take a look at what the ZModeler brush does, and in conjunction with the dynamic subdivision of it, because that's where some fun really comes. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and select our ZModeler brush, which is BZ, right? And then there's our ZModeler brush. The next shortcut is the M key. So I really want to just touch base on the really idea behind this brush and making what we're looking for. So obviously I can work in symmetry mode, right? So if you're new to ZBrush or you're someone that's kind of learning ZBrush, just so you know, the transform has your symmetry right here. So you can see activate symmetry along all 3 axis points, okay? So I want to be able to start pulling on things and doing what I want with this, okay? So this is not an extrusion. Okay, so I want to be very conscious of this vocabulary or verbiage I'm going to start using. Okay, so this might look like an extrusion, but it's really not. It's a mode that's in this brush that's called Qmesh. So the thing to understand about this, we took the approach of, hey, we really want to come up with something a little bit different and maybe something a little more artistic, and using this kind of, the old school kind of low polygon box modeling approach idea. So that's where the brush comes. So we have a possibility to either move faces, edges, or vertex points. So how this brush works is as I scroll over a face, you can see it becomes a red circle. And that orange line, you're going to see where the benefit of that orange line comes in a little bit here. So then we have this face. If I move closer to an edge, the edge becomes white, so that's giving you the highlight. It's even telling you what you can do. So right now I have the option Insert Edge turned on for my edge. Then as you go to a vertex point, you can see there's an orange line that's popping up. So that's an indicator to you that you're highlighting the vertex point. So the approach we're looking at is in here, if we're dealing with these elements of either the face, the edge, or the point, those are really the three things we're going to be looking at moving here, right? So we needed to give a menu for us to have some control. So this is where the spacebar comes into play. Okay? So how you want to break this down and think about, okay, what do you want to affect? Right now I'm affecting my polygon face because that's what's highlighted. So if I hold the spacebar, all the stuff that's here now deals with the polygon face. So if I now scroll over to the edge, you can see I got a completely different menu. Okay? And now it's on Insert, right? And if I go hover over that vertex point, I get a completely different menu. So we made it so that, hey, I can have certain things happening on the face and certain things happening on an edge, which I find myself a lot doing an insert edge, and then then a Qmesh. Okay? So let's take a look at what we can start doing with this. Okay? So maybe I want to start building some kind of scaffolding thing that people would walk on maybe some sci-fi ship or something like that. So let's take a look at things that we can start doing. So along the edge, maybe I want to start inserting an edge. So you can see that's symmetrical, and I'm saying, okay, that's going to come off from here. So now we have that polygon's coming off from here. Okay? And then maybe I want to say, hey, how long is this going to be, this scaffolding part? Okay? So every time you guys click on this polygon, you can see it's adding an edge, right? Because then you're in essence Qmeshing, Qmeshing, Qmeshing. Keep in mind, again, I'm not trying to use the word extrude, because even though it looks like extrude, there's something special about this mode, okay? And this is where some of the power comes in, right? So I'm going to say, okay, that's pretty good, and then maybe I want to come here, and this is where the Qmesh becomes very cool. So I can decide right here, I actually want to bridge across this now, so the Qmesh can actually snap. So you can see this is why I'm trying to stay away from that verbiage of that word extrude, because this mode allows for snapping, hole generating, and much more. So at any point in time, I can decide, okay, I want to come across here, and then we're going to close off right there. So maybe this is now the start of some walkway, okay, that we have. So the beauty of this is I can just quickly, pull things out, and there's going to be an automatic snapping capability. So maybe this scaffolding part, and I'll show you kind of where even this spot's going. I'll load another scene for you guys. I want to have kind of more of an angle through here, maybe like this. You're right through here. So I can pull on this face, and you can see some snapping happens, and you can see there's an angle of change happening here, right? So what's controlling that is if I hold the space bar, okay, right now we're in Qmesh mode, right? So that's the action. That's, hey, what are we doing? Are we creasing? Are we deleting polygon faces? You can see all these options. Are we spinning the polygon face? Or are we masking the face, okay? Below that is kind of the target. What is it you're looking to do? I'm looking to only move a single polygon. Now, in any other 3D applications, you'd be looking at, hey, what if I want to move, in essence, this whole side, right? We would do a whole selection, and then we'd be able to extrude it out. So instead of doing that, we can go here, hold spacebar, and I can say, hey, I actually want the target not to be just one polygon. I kind of want it to be this whole flat area right here, right? And take note that there's two also polygroups along that area right there, right? So I'm going to hold the spacebar, and I'm going to say, how about a flat island? Okay, so this is a flat area and an island. So when I click on this, you can see I get all the polygons, right? And notice now it automatically creates a new polygroup. So this becomes handy because there's going to be times where I really want to use polygroup, and when I start adding creasings and things like that, it's a must-do. You gotta marry it. So even here, we'll just re-polygroup everything. Okay, so you can really see what happens. And you can see now this top part's one polygroup, and this is another polygroup, right? So if I want to, as I'm Q-meshing this, by tapping the Alt key, right? Every time I tap the Alt key, it'll change the polygroup. So you can see I can still be moving and tapping the Alt key. So this comes in handy because there's a lot of times I want to change up what my polygroup's going to look like. Okay? And then I'm going to say, hey, you know what? I don't want that whole thing to come up. I kind of want to start having a nice, maybe a little edge going this way here. And in here, maybe I want it to slowly taper from there. So the beauty of this brush, too, is I can say, okay, right now we're on flat island. I'm going to hold my space bar, right? And think about this also, if I do polygroup all as, say, my target. So this right here, you can see what's trying to move is that polygroup, right? So that polygroup is consistently going around this whole surface, right? So instead of me having to select around that whole thing, all I have to do is change my target to polygroup all, pull out, and you see I get a nice mode happening right there, right? So you think about even things like if I go back to single, I can start doing things like this, create a nice little bevel or a little chamfer, or a nice little feature thing that I want to do in there maybe for my hard surface piece. Okay? And then now maybe I want to continue that. So I'm going to go from this face and go all the way, and you can see that continues that. Now here's the beauty of this brush. I can continue that just by tapping. And you see it does it to the next one, and then does it to the next one. So by tapping, it will continue your action. So here we'll go a little more simple. So if I start to say do something like this, right, and now I want this all to be the same height, so I do that. Now all I have to do is just tap, tap, tap. And you see everything's the same height because it's repeating the action for me. So it becomes pretty handy. Because what if I did something maybe like inserting an edge loop here, right? And let's maybe insert an edge loop here, and let's go ahead and do one here. And then here I start doing, say, something like that. So getting that look, I also want that same thing here. So now all I have to do is tap. You see, I got the same one in a completely different area. So there's a tapping capability to repeat the action, okay? Which then is opening up for me to start saying, hey, you know what? I want this to kind of be gone, and I want this to kind of be gone, and I'm going to have that be gone. So this brush can also, in essence, let you delete stuff on the fly. So now maybe I want to redraw this and have that little angle I was talking about right there, right? And then maybe I want to redraw this and have a little bit of an angle like that, and then now it comes to more of a flat like this. So now I've got this nice little angle happening here and up here, okay? So this brush allows me to start doing things like that. So it doesn't stop there, because if I decided to do something like this, right, and then now I add an edge loop, right, and now I want to put a hole right here, all I got to do is start pulling down, and then boom, there's a hole. So what this has now is the capabilities of us deleting really quickly, creating holes, right, and in essence Q-meshing with the snapping capability. So this allows us to be really quick and really efficient with this. So there's no UVs because you're adding polygons and taking away polygons, so we can't maintain the UVs on this. So if that's your question, yeah, there's no UVs automatically being generated. Because if you look at like that piece I even brought up, and then wait until I show you my hanger for my Gundam that I'm making. And that also slows the process, because then ZBrush has to try and create UVs. Right now, we're just worried about a quick process. But that goes back to, Pat, if you're thinking about polygrouping, I can go use my polygrouping to start thinking about my UV. So building with that prep idea in mind is how I would think about this. So this is great and all. It looks great. Woo, yeah, okay, it's nice. It's definitely a hard surface thing that's happening, right, in here. But I want to kind of see what it looks like when I divide, right? So obviously we can go to geometry and we can just divide this, right? And then now we get an idea of what this looks like. But now what do we run into? Oh, okay, now you can't use this brush, right? So that's a problem. We don't want that. Or think about if you guys decide to switch to maybe a slice brush, which I use often for myself, right? And I want to slice across here. Oh, I can't use that. So we came up with something new, which that's the dynamic subdivision level. So let's undo this, okay? And let's take a look at these options because there's 3 options to this, all right? So we're going to open this dynamic, and I'm going to turn this on. So you can see it looks like the subdivided version of this. But what's beautiful about this is, if you notice, when I scroll over, the ZModeler brush isn't selecting the little polygons there. It's only selecting that big one, right? So now I can pull out, and I can even see what this is going to look like at a softed point, right? And I can say, oh, now I want to come down here to this area and pull this here and maybe match that. And I feel like I want to add an edge loop through here, right? So there's an edge, and you can see I can even use these edge loops and on the fly start seeing what this looks like, kind of harsh, right? So what's controlling this is this slider right here. See this smooth subdiv? So you see that sitting at 2, right? You see that sitting at the number 2. If I turn this off, actually let's do this. Here's what we look like with that slider sitting at 2, okay? Let's turn it off and let's divide twice. Same thing. Same exact thing. So this dynamic is kind of like giving you a preview of what your subdivision is going to look like when you divide twice on this model, but now we have the option of using every feature in ZBrush, even the ones that can only be used on something with no subdivision levels. So in essence, I can use mirror and weld, I can use slicing, and actually know what it's going to look like when it is smooth. So this has became like, oh my goodness for me, okay? So there's actually 3 types of dynamic subdiv smoothings, okay? So when we turn dynamic on, we have the smooth. So in essence, that's the same thing as dividing, right? So as I go up, it's like dividing more often, okay? So we have also a flat subdiv. So let's turn off the smooth, okay? And let's turn flat off. So it'll look like nothing's happening, right? It looks like, okay, nothing is absolutely changed. Well, it's really dividing for us, right? We just, as a user right now, can't really see it. So if I do this, it just still looks very blocky, okay? This is the same thing, guys, as going here to my divisions, turning off the SMT for smooth, right? And then I divide twice. So you see it does the same thing. So if I show you your polyframe, this is in essence what's happening with dynamic, okay, when that flat subdiv is on 2. So a lot of people might be, well, why are you guys doing that? That doesn't make any sense at all because it's really not doing anything. Well, there's techniques that people like to use here, and this is one of the techniques where some people like to divide something a couple times with smooth off, then I turn smooth back on, and then divide maybe once or twice, and you can see now you get a hard surface, but it kind of has a rounded edge, and that's more realistic of something that is hard surface in real life. If you take a look at where you're at, you know, your computer screen or anything like, there is no perfect 90 degree in manufacturing. It doesn't really exist because there's molding process and things like that. You can't get a perfect 90 degree in anything you look around your house or anything at your desk. It's not perfectly 90 degrees. So that's also the one big thing I want to hit home with hard surfacing. Everyone keeps it perfectly 90 degrees, and I think it looks too much CG. So we need to start making it look less CG and more like something hard surface. So let's undo this and take this idea and concept, right? Where I have a flat 2, then I can combine it, and you can see I can do a smooth 2. So I'm still now what, though? I'm still nice and low, right? And you can see what this is going to look like at any point in time. So you can really see the edging that you're creating here as you start to build this piece. Maybe, hey, I want this to come up here, and I want it to come up here, and then now I kind of want it to taper down like that. Yeah, that's looking nice. I want to add a nice little insert here because actually there's going to be another hole there coming in here, right? And then maybe along inside here, I'm going to add an edge here, okay? Because maybe now what I want to do is I want to Q-mesh this whole loop. So this is where that little orange line comes in really handy, right? So what I'm going to do is hold the space bar, and I'm going to say polyloop, right? Q-mesh, right? And right now it's aligning by the 10th, which means there's 10 steps, right? But watch when I do this. So you can see I get that nice little ridge, right? And if I do this again, do you see that? I can kind of create my own little even kind of beveling chamfer right there that I want. Okay, so all I'm doing is adding an edge loop, right? And then I can poly loop this out, like maybe something like that. And then depending on what side, I can even go up this way. Right? And so now you see that effect that I'm making right there. And now I'm previewing it and seeing it. So this looks great. So we're sitting at 252 polygons. Awesome! Right? But then we're dividing it up a lot in memory. So this is where the third one comes in, which I really enjoyed actually using. And that's this grid right here. So this is a new way to divide. So I'm going to put it to 1, and it'll look like nothing's happening. But really what's happening is we are globally beveling every edge, okay? So we're beveling every edge through here. So this little coverage slider, see, controls that bevel that's happening. So in essence now there's beveling in ZBrush. Thank you. I've always wanted beveling. I was like, yes, victory for the user base, right? So I have the power. It's like the He-Man thing. So I have coverage here, okay? So this was huge for me, okay, to be able to see this. So we have the sliders just controlling how big the bevel is. Next to it is the consistent. So this is really important. If I turn this off, you'll see that certain beveling changes. Specifically, look in this area right here. Right, so see how this is a nice consistent little bevel? But right here, it's not, hey, save your work. It's always important. Okay, you see right here, that bevel isn't the same. It's because the bevel is being based upon the polygon lengths. So obviously here, these two polygons, this polygon here and this polygon here, are pretty much what? The same length and relatively the same height. The problem is this polygon is not. It's not the same length and really the same. It's a lot smaller, so that bevel becomes bigger. So I want a consistent beveling happening everywhere. So then that's why we added that consistent brush, because that was like a big thing for me when we were developing this. So not only beveling, we can switch to chamfer. Okay, and if you're not familiar with this, what this is now more of a rounded area. So if I add more grids, right, so we'll add more grids there, so now it's 3. You see it becomes more rounded. Compared to if I now switch to a bevel, it's very flat, right? Beautiful thing is I can combine them, right? So now I sound like that girl from the Wedding Crashers. I will find you. Okay, so you can bevel and chamfer at the same time. So I started really playing with this and figuring out what can I do with this? What is something that a lot of people maybe haven't made or tried to make? So I started thinking about scenes and things like that. And specifically for me, I'm on a huge hard surface, like Gundam thing kick. So I started making a big hanger. So let me load that for you guys so you guys can kind of see, and we'll recreate some stuff in there, and then I'll show you guys the actual Gundam piece that I'm making. So give me a minute here. I got to load that up for you guys. Let's see. And I got to look at my dates. Sorry, it's a project. It's not a tool. I'm just looking at the dates from the last one that I played with here. Okay, we'll load this one. This looks good. Okay, so this is a project that I saved, and what this is an entire scene that I'm trying to create. This is a new feature that's popping up, so look at that. Worked out perfect for us. So this is a thing where we're creating an automatic shortcut to the folder where I was at. Okay, so I'm going to hit OK, and then I'm going to pull up my scene. So what I have now is this is a crane that I started working on for the whole scene. Okay, so this is some crane that's going to go above the Gundam so I can take things apart. So let's turn all of our subtools on so we can really see the idea here that I'm trying to do. So this is my entire hanger. So obviously the super average dude here, right? I'm using him for scale. It also looks pretty funny. That's where my Gundam's going to stand, right? So you can say I'm duplicating him through here, and this is an elevator shaft to go up, and then this is, you know, observation deck. So this is a combination of the ZModeler brush, Nano, and Array. That's pretty much everything you see here. That's how it's all created, are those 3 elements. Okay? So you can see this particular piece right here. I only created one of them, and then I arrayed it across. So in fact, even I only created one of these, and then arrayed it 4 times, right? And created one of these, and arrayed it 4, so forth and so on. And then once I had this, I arrayed it across 3 times. So we'll get to the array, and we'll figure this out. So I kind of want to start looking at how some of this was even possibly made. So let's take a look at kind of where in the scaffolding parts that I have here, in essence the walkway that I have going on here. Okay, so we'll frame into this. So you can see my walkway from the top has some hard elements, right? And then there's kind of like a grid thing happening through here, right? So how I made this happen was with Nano, okay? So what I want to do is kind of with you, let's recreate something a little bit like that, and let's see what we can do with this, right? So let's see how much fun and what can happen with that. So let's start fresh again with a cube. Before we dive in, then I'm going to look at the questions really quick that have been popping up. Okay, so Joseph, my fellow LA person, that's non-zero flat subdiv and non-zero smooth subdivs at the same time. In what order are they done? So it's a good question, Joseph. So he's asking about, so let me just load something so we can get something a little more simple here. Let's go to our initialize state again, all right? And I want to make a cube, right? Let's go ahead and make this cube. Beautiful cube, right? I don't actually want all these edges, right? So first of all, where is my symmetry, right? So I turn on symmetry, so this is the side. So I'm in ZModeler where it's insert mesh brush. If I hold the Alt key, right, see I can delete edges, okay? So if I don't want an edge this way and then this way, I can even delete it, okay? I can even, if I want to, go to insert and create multiple edge loops. And I can start creating multiple edge loops across this if I want to, evenly spaced. So one of the popular questions that people ask, hey, how can I get right to the center, right, of a face? This is actually a little trick that I like to do. I hold the space bar, I go to multiple edge loops, and down here we have now the third option, which is modifiers. So you can see it's interactive resolution. So that means moving back and forth is interactively changing. If I go to specific resolution, okay, it's in essence 8. So no matter what, it only gives 8 spans. No matter where I click, right, see, I only get 8, which is nice, and now I can create really nice, great patterns. So what I do is I like to drop this to 1, and then I can go, boom, that's dead center. So in essence, a quarter in on this side, boom, and that's a quarter. So what can I do? I can say delete, and then now that went in a quarter of the way, right? So I'm cheating the system by using the multi-edge and turning it only into 1, and then now I can quickly do quarters, halves, and things like that. And then obviously I can delete on the fly. All right, so the order that you were asking, Joseph, about what's happening here, so we'll Q-mesh this out. Oh, let's Q-mesh only a single polygon and Q-mesh that out, okay, is when we're doing this dynamic, okay, and you turn this on, the first thing that's going to happen is the flat. So if I turn this on, flat happens first, and then the smooth. That's the order that goes in, okay? So if I don't want to use either one of these, and I find myself always putting this grid to 1 with a nice bevel, having it consistent, and this usually is pretty nice for me, and it's good to go. So here's some benefits. I can now use mirror and weld. Boom, mirror and weld. Now I can say get rid of this, and now I've got a nice mirror and weld, right? And so now I can insert an edge. Oh, I'm on the multiple edge, right? So I want to say, no, I just want a single edge. And I'm going to come across like this, right? And then maybe now I want to come across like so, right? And now I want to start thinking about other stuff like mirror and welding, right? So maybe I want what's happening on the one side, I also want to happen on the other side, right? So if I start doing things like this, I switch this mirror weld to say maybe a Z, you can see what happens there. So what's happening is mirror and weld is looking at the floor world. And here, let me move this up a little bit so we can see really what's happening. I'm going to turn perspective off. Okay, and you can see if I go to my draw, and we go to our modifiers, let's put our framing up. Okay, you see those lines right there, the red, the green, the blue. Those are your positive world values. So the red is obviously meaning the X, the blue is the Z, the green is the Y. So that color means this is the positive X of the world, opposite side is negative, so forth and so on. So by default, mirror and weld is looking only at the world. So if I look like this, you can see it's splitting this. So whatever's on the positive side of the Z world, which is this, gets mirrored over and then welded. So that's why when I click this, you get a mirrored weld. Now, if I turn on this local sim and do that same thing, I get a completely different result. Right? So you guys see that's a completely different result because now instead of looking at the world, it's looking at the mesh. Right? So what I could also do is do deformation, and I'm going to say, how about let's mirror this to Z and do that instead. Right? And then maybe what I want to do is kind of move this kind of across like that. Right? And then now do mirror and weld, and you can see what I get now. I get that little cube form, and it's obviously symmetrical. So I'm kind of just cheating the system a little bit here by turning on that little LSIM, and I can have control of either mirror and welding across. And the beauty part is, again, remember we're in dynamic. It's smooth. I can see what's going on, and I can move here. So let's move along because I definitely want to get to the ZModeler stuff as well. So I can say QMesh, right? I can say flat island. That allows me to QMesh. But maybe I don't want to QMesh. Maybe I just want to do something else, like maybe just move. So you can see here it's not adding an edge, but I'm actually moving the surface. So again, I'm clicking QMesh where I'm saying flat island, which is this whole flat surface, pulling that out, but I don't want to create another polygroup, and I don't want to create another edge. I just want to move it and kind of make it skinnier. So what you do is you hold the Shift key. Hold the Shift key, and then I can move that edge and make it a little bit closer. Right? So now I can say, okay, this is turning out really good, so let's do a symmetry instead of along the X. I want to be working along the Z. Right? Because maybe now I want to insert an edge loop here. Right? And you see it's not happening on the other side. So you guys can either use mirror and welding. Right? So turning on the floor, this is actually the side I want to have, so I can do something like this. Say I want that on that side as well, so I use mirror and weld along the X. There I go. Right? Or I could have, as a user, gone here and just said, hey, not only along the Z, go along the X, right? And you see it's happening on both sides. And then now I can Q-mesh this, right? And say, let's put an edge there, and let's have it actually do that. That's kind of more what I'm looking for. Okay? So this is how I started creating that kind of piece, okay, that went and say, oh, let me switch back to a single polygon. And I want that to be straight into a hole. So now you can see I can get this really unique shape very quickly, low polygon, that I would not have been able to do this fast in ZBrush before. So what's great about this is I can actually break things off as well. So not only can I QMesh like this, right? And of course I can do a flat island again, and in polygroups. I can even do this, rip it right off by holding the Control key. So now I'm holding the Control key, so I have another piece that I can say, hey, let's do this. And now maybe this piece has a rounded surface portion here. Well, I kind of want to make this be higher. So what I'm going to do is say polygons, right? And I'm going to move. So obviously I do this, it moves just, what? That one polygon. I want to move this whole island. Okay, so this is one island, this is two islands. So I'm going to hold the space bar and look for an island option. Oh, there's an island option. Let's see what happens there. Hey, now we're talking. Right? So you can see this. I don't even have to switch to move, do any masking or anything. I can move this whole island. Awesome. Right? So now maybe I want to have some kind of round bridge thing happening here. So what I'm going to do is actually delete my polygons. So I'm going to say delete and delete. Right? So I have it on both sides. In my edge option, I'm going to switch to bridge. Okay? And I don't want to bridge from edge to edge. I want to bridge the two holes. And maybe I want to have a circular thing happening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click that first edge. Okay, and now you can see that ZBrush is telling me, hey, okay, click the second edge now and start dragging to reshape. So now I'm just going to go and say, hey, I want it to go to this edge. And you can see I can go up and down to add spans. And I can go back and forth or left and right to change that angle. So up and down adds my spans. Okay? And so now I can start creating something maybe like this. Right? And so now I got this really unique shape. I don't know, it's going to be something for a weapon, right, that goes through there. So it allowed me to start doing things like that. So we have obviously that option as well with the face. So if I go this and I say bridge, okay, do I want to bridge across normals or a tangent? So I'm going to say a line through the normal. So that's what that little orange line is going to come in. So because the orange line is facing this way, okay, if I start doing this, you can see what it does. It starts aligning with the one next to it, right? So now I can start getting elements like that happening. Very cool stuff starting to happen here, right? Then I can take this a step further and say, let's insert an edge here. Let's go right there, maybe like that. And on the point, maybe I want to split it, right? So I want to split the point, and then now I can split that point right there. Okay, and now maybe I want to Q-mesh that in. So I'm going to say Q-mesh on a polygon, and I'm actually going to go to single polygon. And what's beautiful here is we can create temporary polygroup with the white by holding the Alt key, and then I can push that in. Right? So this is just starting to become now endless. I can really start to create very unique objects and items here. Okay? And at any point in time, I can come across here, right? And then, hey, I want this to start bridging across. And you see what it's doing? It's automatically snapping with the next one for me. Right? So maybe I want to do this and maybe add an edge loop here. And then now it won't automatically snap, but when they reach, there's an angle of snapness that'll happen. Okay? So maybe what I want to do is start snapping across here, right? And then that face or that edge, maybe I want to Q-mesh that edge, or maybe even extrude that edge to kind of do this, right? And then now I can Q-mesh now this way and make a completely different angle happen there. All right, so you can see this is just becoming an endless process of me being able to do whatever I want with it. Okay? So this is how I started creating those ideas and the spots, right? So obviously we go backwards here. We're having some fun. Let's get back to this point. Now in that scaffolding, I started creating, like a pattern there, almost like you would see at like a factory or something like that. So how did I do that? So what I did really easily, honestly, is I went, well, we have this wonderful plane here that's equally distributed. Okay? So I'm going to say, hey, I don't want as many. Maybe I'll just do 10 by 10. Okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into an insert mesh brush. Okay? And I'm going to say a new one. So it's now an insert mesh brush. So as I draw out, right, well, obviously this needs to be make a poly mesh. Right? As I draw out now, I just get that exact same point. Okay? So what I want to do is come back to here. Right? And I want to draw one of these planes out, let's say. So I'm going to turn display double on so you guys can just see what's going on. Draw up that plane. Hey, I wanted to draw perfectly straight across. So guess what? I can use my transpose line. As I click and hold the shift key, you can see that these snap to the world axis. Excuse me, left me. Okay? So now when I draw, hold the shift key and bada bing, bada boom. There we go. So then, I don't know why I'm saying bada bing, bada boom, but go with it and enjoy the process, people. Just enjoy the madness of it. Okay, so now I can say, hey, that's kind of what I'm looking for right there. That's looking great. I actually don't need the whole thing, right? So let's do this. Let's just separate these by make them separate subtools. So I'm going to go to split, and I'm going to say split the parts. Say OK. I got this piece itself, and now this piece. So I don't need this. Okay, so we're going to do that. Geometry, modify, delete hidden. So now I have this piece. So what I want to do now is a NanoMesh, in essence, is an insert mesh brush and micro mesh meeting together with instancing happening. Okay, so now I want to say let's instance this. Okay, so I'm going to say brush, and let's just use the insert cube here. In fact, I want to use the cube that's in this train brush. Okay. And there's a reason for that. This cube I made here is only 6 faces, and it's already got creasing on it. So I'm going to just select that, right? So all this is insert, right? So you can see. So what I want is that cube to be populated across this plane. So what I'm going to do is hit the brush, and I'm going to turn this into a NanoMesh brush. So when I click this, what's the beautiful thing about this is what it becomes, in essence, is a new type of ZModeler brush, where that insert nano is now actually on that cube is on that, okay? So as I start drawing across here, you can see that the polygon changes, and then it's only being drawn there. Notice the polygon number here. So you see it's on 60. See it's not changing? Because these are now instances of nanos, right? So if I look at this, okay, if I'm looking at this mesh, okay, and I go, hey, nano, right? There are nano indexes being created. So you see there's 3 here because I drew 3. You see it's the cubes. Okay, so let's undo this. Okay? And let's say instead of, hey, on a single polygon, how about all polygons? Right? So I'm going to draw that out, and I'm not worried about being perfect right now. Okay? And then there we go. Because I can now adjust this. So this is the beauty of this. You can see here my rotation wasn't sitting at 0, so I can say, hey, put it at 0. There you go. It's perfect. And watch as we can show the placement, right? Or not show their placements. Look into that. Right? So, but what I can also start doing with this is doing some crazy stuff with this. I can start doing some tiling. So maybe I want to tile it, let's say 4 times along the H, and let's do maybe 2 along the vertical. But I can actually control how this is going to be patterned. So if I click here, there are grid options here. So I can say to the corner, right? So it's only putting it on the corners. So this starts to look like, hey, that looks like something very cool that maybe you would see on some sci-fi wall. And then maybe now I can start creating an edge. I can start using panel for something to create an edge here. But I can start going through this and switching how this will be patterned through here. Right? So this slider right here, right? And in essence, is me clicking on this and saying, well, what it's going to be. So this only comes live when I start tiling. Okay? So you have that option there. Okay? But what I really want to do is create that kind of pattern-looking thing going across. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the size of these cubes on the fly. So I'm going to say, let's go look at the length. Yeah, I want it to be longer, like maybe like that. Okay, and I can have it fit, right, or fill. Okay, I'm just going to go proportional and say, let's just make it longer, right, and make it so they kind of overlap a little bit. There we go. I keep moving my hand. And then now maybe that's the look I want. But maybe what I want to do is tile it, right? So I can tile, right? How many times do I want it to tile? I can tile any way that I want to, right? So I can say, yeah, let's have a couple more happen. So let's tile this maybe twice. That looks better. Let's change the length again in here. Okay, maybe I don't want it as the width to be the same. Maybe that's the width I want, right? So you can see there we go. Now maybe across, and maybe these are like the stronger part of this, but across now I want to put the same kind of thing. So I'm going to copy this, right? I'm going to add another cube here, right? So I'm going to add a cube. They disappear, but if I hold the Shift key, it adds it and creates another instance. So now I've created another instance of this, right? So I'm going to put my rotation back to being perfect, and now I'm going to paste. So I'm getting the same thing, right? But if I start to rotate things, right, I can get a completely different result. So I can even maybe make some kind of angular piece like that. Right? So now what I'm playing with here is what I want to happen, and I'll have to look at this. The show placement should actually hide the polygon for that. And this is in essence how I created this piece. So I just started using this nano capability to go across into this, right? So the beauty, again, remember, this is only 60 polygons because it's not real geometry. It's being instanced across, right? So this can lead me into the ArrayMesh. So what I can do is, hey, I want this to duplicate across, right? So I'm going to turn on my array, and then I'm going to say, hey, I don't want the position or the size to change of this, and I'm going to turn this transpose line on. What this does is now using the transpose line more of as an array. So you can see there's a repeat, a stage, and you can see there's a yellow circle there. So what this is going to allow me to do is say, hey, I kind of want this to move this way, right? And then I want to say how many times do I want this to repeat. Right? So this repeat is the same thing as me going on the slider here and saying repeat. And then now I can continue to move this and change the gap between these. So that's the same thing. You see my offsets changing here. So you guys can see I can sit here and put 0 offset in the X. What's really happening here is this Z offset is changing. So it's the same thing as me using the transpose line in move, right? And then just moving this back and forth, right? So then, of course, I can say, hey, let's copy that, right? And I can open and save things, right? So I'm going to say, hey, instead of opening one, let's just copy that. Let's go to the top subtool. Let's turn on the ArrayMesh for that, and then let's paste, right? So you got a little change in difference because the mesh itself is different, right? This is just a plane. This is bigger, and it's got some changes in there, right? So, but I can still manipulate and change this. So what I want to tell ZBrush is I actually want to use the transpose line kind of as that, and then now I can have this line up for where I want, and now I'm creating this pattern. Okay? We could have gone one interesting step further. So let's undo our arrays. Okay? Let's completely undo these array meshes. And let's actually convert this into geometry. Right? So right now I have nano. I have this nano happening. So in inventory, right, I can actually tell it to create it from the mesh. Okay? So I can say 1 to mesh, and now it's actual physical geometry. Right? So now I could even get rid of this if I wanted to. Right? So now I have something like this happening, and then I can say delete hidden. Right? Because I don't want that hidden portion. It's real geometry now, so obviously the polygon count is now changing. Then I can say, hey, well, let's now merge these two together. Right? So I use nano to start creating my pieces. Okay? And then now I want to kind of array this now. So I can turn on my ArrayMesh, and now it's just repeating in the way that I want. Okay? I can append a new. So in essence, that's going to now create a clone of that. But what's really cool is I can actually chain this. So you see it only added it at the end. Right? It only added 1 at the end. So now this has got its own repeating pattern. Right? So as I kind of offset this, right? And you can see I can move this however I want. And I can even, this yellow circle, change my pivot point. And what this comes in advantage is if I start rotating things, right? I can start doing this. Okay? And what's great about this, at stage 1, okay, I can tell it align to the path. So you see now these all are trying to stay aligned because I told them in array 1, whatever I do, make them kind of align as much as you can. Right? So now I can start manipulating and playing with this as much as I want. I can say, hey, let's kind of have this smooth transition through there. Right? It's almost like a roller coaster starting to happen now. Okay, and then of course if I start doing things like raising this up, you know, it starts going up, and I start saying, hey, I actually want this to start rotating more. Right? So you see it's starting to bend that way. And then, hey, I want more repeats of that happening. Right? So on the fly, I can start changing all of this. So I don't know why, but it's going that way. Okay? So that's kind of an idea of what you can do with Array and Nano. So we're coming close to running out of time here, so I want to touch base on the ZRemesher. Okay, and then I'll come back to some questions. All right, so let me load something that's from Vitaly that I got from him. He was kind enough to give this piece to me. Right? So this is a Vitaly piece, right, that you can see, all right, is not clean. Right? It is not clean at all. So the original piece, okay, because I kind of just prepped this really quick. So let me get the original piece here from Vitaly. So this was his original piece that he uses like Max and things like that. So the things you got to look at is I wanted to get this piece to a point where I have some polygrouping, right? And because I'm going to use that polygrouping, so someone brought up UVing, I can use that polygrouping for UVing, but I really want to use that polygrouping for remeshing, okay? So this is the original mesh that he gave me. So what I want to do is kind of polygroup this based upon the normals. So I'm going to go down here to my polygroups, and I'm just going to click this button, group by normals, right? It's saying, hey, it's going to give a lot of polygons. That's fine. I'm good with it. So you can see every angle change, which is set at 45 degrees. So anything that's 45 degrees and less gets a new polygroup. Okay? So as it's going through here, it's looking at this. There was one other problem here with his mesh. Okay? When it imported, it wasn't all welded together. Okay? It came actually as separate little pieces. Okay? So the next thing I needed to do, which is new to this version, is in the geometry modified topology, there is now a weld point with a slider. So there's a tolerance slider there. So I'm just going to say weld points, right? And then now, see, as I divide, it looks good, right? If I turn, well, it doesn't look that good because the triangles, right? So when I divide, see, like in there is a mess. That's ugly, ugly, ugly. So obviously we need to remesh this, right? So even if I turn on dynamic, it's not going to be pretty. Okay? So what I did is I took the time to look at this piece and say, hey, let's polygroup this off more intelligent too. So I used that quick group by normals to just kind of get my polygroups. But if you notice, in here I made this all one polygroup, Where here, see, it didn't, because there was a degree of change there, right? And then obviously, if you start looking closely at through here, this line, this chamfer that he's got going through here, it's all different polygroups because there's a degree of change there. On mine, I didn't do that. Okay? I kind of want to make this all the same. The next thing I did is his piece is sitting at 26,000 polygons, right around 27,000 polygons, right? But in some of the areas, there's just a single row of geometry. So here's a little tip for you guys. A little tip from the Gaboury desk. Okay? Because my last name's Gaboury if you didn't know that. A little tip from the Gaboury desk here. Hill is, hey, that one single polygon, the ZRemesher actually tends to have some problems with that sometimes. Because how do you remesh a single row of polygons? What do you do? It's just plots again, right? But you got to remember, it's trying to remesh all this automatically. So what I like to do sometimes, specifically with his particular piece, is I like to go to creasing, and I use the old crease Paul Gaboury. It's not really the crease Paul Gaboury. It's just a, I like to say because I asked for it, and the coders were kind enough to give it to me. And it's really a crease by polygroups. Right, so it automatically gives a creasing by polygroup. So the beauty of this is when I divide now, right, I'm not destroying the mesh and getting that ugly version, except in that area right there, it's really ugly. So obviously I need to go fix that area right in there with the polygrouping, or it looks like it's just bad from the beginning. I probably messed it up somehow. Okay, so now I've divided. I'm sitting at 125,000 polygons, but in that area specifically, I now don't have just one polygon, right? And what I meant by one, there was only one polygon. So obviously now each face got divided 4. So there's more information there. So what I'm going to do is tell the ZRemesher, hey, I want you to try and maintain this hard surfacing, okay? So what we'll do here is then we'll go ahead and just do a little duplicate. So we have a duplicate. And down here, what's new to the ZRemesher, okay, is a new option called the Keep Groups, all right? So what that's doing is looking at polygrouping, okay? And next there's a new slider called smooth grouping. That slider is very crucial if I was to turn this into a Dynamesh. And I'll show you what it's doing if I turn this into a Dynamesh. So I'm going to say, well, we were around, the base was around 25, 27, so we can put in 27 here, okay? I'm going to go ahead and make sure symmetry's on. So there's a symmetry along the Z. And I'm going to say, okay, you do your thing, ZRemesher, and then I'm clicking and letting ZRemesher do the job of giving me a new piece here that doesn't have those crazy huge triangles, little triangles. I want a nice surface that's clean geometry. Okay? So when this is done, I'm actually going to get nice clean geometry, and then also when I divide it, what's new to P2 obviously is I can go to 100 million polygons on this particular mesh. I can take this thing to around 56 million polygons and sculpt on it and get beautiful results. Right? So that's really what's crucial here, and that's what's important. So there you go. It's done ZRemeshing. As you can see, nothing really changed drastically. This is huge, guys. You could not do this with ZRemesher version 1. Okay? This version, it's keeping the polygrouping for me. It's keeping the hard surface for me, right? So I can come in here and I can still do what? I can still come in here and say increase by polygroups if I want to, right? So then as I divide now on this, so we can divide, 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 right? There's 3 million. Now I can go up again to 12 million, go up again, right? So this is, I'm in the 64-bit version, so it's going to allow me to get to that 56 million polygon range. So here I'm at 49 million polygons, right? So any brush now that I grab, let's say the Damien standard, maybe I want to start putting some fine maybe points in here, right? Some, just a little cut edge in there maybe. So you can see I can cut into that and start sculpting on this. Oh, yes. Now we're talking, right? So you can see you can start adding all these elements now. And I've got a nice, clean mesh, right, with subdivision levels that's all quadded. So that's what this new feature in ZRemesher, the new ZRemesher did. Now, I brought up, okay, NanoMeshing. Okay? So what we have is if I took this version, right, that we have and ask it to NanoMesh it. The beauty of NanoMesh that we added in 4R6 is it now retains your polygrouping. So that comes in huge advantage for me here, right? So I can say, hey, all right, let's start. I always like to start a little low. I'm going to say 32. I'm not going to have the projection on and NanoMesh it. Okay, looks nothing like it. Undo. All right, so clearly 128 still not enough. So it's kind of like a trial and error, so let's go up maybe his high. All right, there, it's starting to hold that. We're sitting around 565,000 polygons. But if we look, it looks from a distance like it's holding it. But what's happening, right? We're not getting clean polygrouping through there, right? We're not getting that clean polygroup. So when we go to try and ZRemesh this, if we're doing it based on polygroups, even this one, right, you're not getting very clean polygroups, right? So what I like to do is maybe go a little bit more. Let's maybe put it at 1,000, just so I have more geometry, so there's less of a breakage up of the polygroups. You're still going to have it, though. But what this slider does in the ZRemesher, right, this smooth groups, it smooths only the border edging, right? So it does something like this, guys. If I go to, say, the masking options here, you see this masking by feature here. So you got borders, groups, and creasing, right? So I can say groups and mask, right? See what it masks? Only masks the polygrouping borders. I'm going to inverse this, smooth it once, let's say, and then now I'm going to go to deformation, and let's do maybe a little polish by feature. And let ZBrush see that smoothing that's starting to happen now. Here, we'll go even a little stronger. We'll open the little eye, which makes it really strong, and go 100%. And then there you go. Right? So you see, now that's nice and clean. Right? So when I go now to ZRemesh that, it's going to give me really good results. So in essence, that slider is doing what I'm showing you right now. So that's what this little slider right here is doing. It's smoothing down our border edges of our polygroups so we can make sure it doesn't create a jaggedness. Okay? So let me go to the questions because it's 12:04. Barbara, I don't know, what kind of time do we have here? Because I'll talk forever.
I know. No, but it's a great show. So I think usually, we should be done. But, if you want to continue for another 15 minutes, I will be happy to allow that. Can you talk for another 15 minutes and make everybody happy?
Yeah, let me look at the questions that are coming up
Yes.
here. Paige, you're asking holding the Alt keys quad only? No, that's not what it's doing. So you're asking if the ZRemesher, when you're ZRemeshing something, right? Does holding the Alt key give it quad only? No, that's a whole other algorithm. It's a completely different algorithm for remeshing when you hold the Alt key and you tap. If you want to try and keep it, well, it is all quads by default, the ZRemesher. That's what it's always trying to create, is all quads, right? But if you want to kind of also create something that's a little more evenly distributed polygons, and the polygons are relatively the same size, that's what the adaptive slider is controlling. So if you turn that all the way down to 0, then you'll get more perfectly quadded. It's not going to be 100% because it's still got to evaluate the surface and look at the surface and do that. But holding the Alt key is just giving a whole different algorithm. Okay, that answer that question for you, James. Hold on, I'm trying to catch up here. It fixed inside where the so Joseph, you were also asking about when I was doing that QMesh, right? So if we let's load that project. I'm assuming back there when we had something here, let's grab this guy. Okay, and then we started doing and we'll turn the floor off. So let's switch to our ZModeler brush, QMesh single poly, let's insert an edge, come across, insert an edge. So I'm assuming, James, I'm sorry, it was James, right? Yeah, Joseph. If I come across this, yeah, we're automatically snapping that little portion because there's snapping capability to this. So if you look, right, see there's tenth snapping, no alignment, right? And see there's normal traction, weave track, or normal traction, right? So here's quarter stepping, right? So the difference between that is if I pull something out like this, right, and then I want to start snapping, it does it in quarters, right? So I can only go 4 snaps in essence, right? So I can either go a quarter, half, right, 3/4, and then all the way, right? So that's what these are controlling. That's what this stuff is controlling here, right? So if I say snap a full, it'll only do a full snap. I can't do any of that angling, right? I can do half snap, so then I can get a half snap or a full snap. That's it. Okay? I can also introduce triangles. Okay? Enable triangle snapping, which means I can actually snap and get a triangle if I want. Right? So there you go. Now that's a triangle that's there. So now I got a really edge happening there. You know, sometimes I want to maybe make a triangle by doing this, bridging across 2 points. So I can click here and there, right? And then I need to do it on the other side. So click there, and there, right? And now I have that, and now QMesh that down. Right? And then now maybe here I want to insert an edge loop there. Right? And then now maybe I'll QMesh that away. And then there you go. I got some kind of other different type of shape. Maybe I'll QMesh this here. Right? And then maybe say, I kind of want to make that flat. So let me just cheat and use the flip brush to do that. I'll just, there we go. It's nice and flat. Right? So those 2 points are now flat. Just cheating the system in essence a little bit. Well, it's not really cheating. It's being, it's just thinking about how you can use this. Right? So we can have a lot of fun with this. There's so many shapes that you can do with this. So that answer your question, Joseph, for you? I'm just catching up with the questions, guys. Well, the picture I had a couple problems with bridging edges. Yeah, Angela, if you want to email me. So guys, here I'm going to give you my email address. No prank joking or prank calls. You could do it. It doesn't matter to me. So, and Angela's question, she's having some problems, so I just put my email address there. So feel free to email me if you want. It's the dynamic. Okay, so this is coming up. Someone's asking. I keep hitting it by accident, right? It has the same controls as normal subdivision levels. So when you guys just tap D, okay, that's turning it on. So it's the same thing if I divided this, right? So Shift D walks up, Shift D walks down, D walks up. So we wanted to have the same controls because it's subdivision levels, right? So by hitting D, turns on dynamic automatically if there's not already subdivision levels. So, and the only time you would hit D is if you're using subdivision levels. So that's probably what you're tapping, James, to turn on dynamic all the time. Is there a way to move and snap points or edges, especially to other points, fixed to only 1 or 2 axes? Well, there's alignments for points. There's also movement for points, right? So you have, if I'm looking at this point, there's move options, and you can see infinity X, infinity Y, infinity Z, infinity depth. So if I'm doing this infinity depth, I'm doing this, right? It's looking at the depth to try and move things, okay? But I can tell infinity Z, right? And then start moving this. So you have these options, right? I need a bigger draw size. Right, so see it's starting to move them all, okay? So you have these movements. There's also the capability to slide, right, edges, or slide points. So you can slide like this edge up and down, but I can also just do here, go to edge, do a slide, right, and you can slide just an edge or a complete edge, right? So you can see I can slide that edge down. There. Okay, I can't snap this edge to this edge. There's collapsing capability with an edge. So if you go here and there's a collapse, right, I can collapse the poly loop, right, and I would do what loop do I want to collapse, right? I can do that, that, right? But I can also just collapse an edge as well. Right? It's just trying to figure that out. But keep in mind, ZBrush can't make n-gons. It can only do triangles and quads. So that's the only part where you're trying to do stuff maybe from another application where you temporarily can have an n-gon. You can't do that in ZBrush. So what I start to do is obviously start to use masking and holes and things. So maybe I will mask off this, right? So then only if I want to slide this edge, this complete edge, right? It's only going to slide this one down. Right, so then I can get that look to it. Right, and then I can say, this doesn't look good, so I need to switch to insert, and I'm going to undo that. Right, maybe that's what I'm looking for. Or, you know, maybe I want the edge to come more this way. Okay, that's about all. That's about some of the things that you can do. How do you do something like keep faces together off? Jason, I'm not sure that exact question that you're asking. How do you do something like keep faces together off? Is it you're just looking for what I showed with the QMesh option, where I can even just paint temporarily, and as I move, if I hold the control key, it rips it right off? Is that kind of what you're looking for, Jason? Something like that? Okay, David, you're asking, say I've imported a mesh and I want to project the detail onto the ZBrush low subdivision mesh. Has the projection function changed our sim compared to how it works in the R6? No, we haven't touched the projection function at all. So if you're talking about extruding each face, you're talking about extruding one face at a time like this, and then if I tap, I can get the same exact result. Are you looking for something like that? Let's see. I'm sorry guys, I'm just trying to get to the question. Yeah, you can do the whole island at once, Jason. So you gotta think about this. That's your target, right? This is the island right here, right? This surface right here. So all you have to do is change your target to island, flat island, and then extrude that whole thing at once. It's not about selecting each face. It's about looking at this. Because think about it, there's a polygroup right there too, right? So I can even say, how about if I want a polygroup island, right? And see what that does. See, now it's moving every polygroup as well, right? So there's polyloop flat, polyloop polygroup, right? So there's a whole bunch of different ones in here. Flat and polygroup, right? So you see that blue one's now not moving because it's a different polygroup, right? So I can even say, hey, well, this is going to end up being a different polygroup. So I can temporarily paint and then just keep tapping the Alt key and it creates a new polygroup. Then I can go here and see now that one doesn't get touched. None of those get touched because my target is a flat surface, but also pay attention to the polygroup. Yeah, this is welding each face because it's not an extrusion. So if you don't want to weld each face, just switch to extrude and do the same exact option. And then you're extruding the faces. Right, so the QMesh is automatically also going to weld everything too when you start welding. right? Or if you wanted to, you could do what I did, right? Single polygroup extrude it once, and then do the next one, and the next one, and the next one, right? So you could have gone that process as well, too. Okay? There's even things like, here, you can inset. I like to have some fun with this sometimes, and I can say inset that one, right? But then I can say, how about I inset the whole flat island at the same time, right? And then now what I can do, if I'm thinking, I can do this and then make new polygroups also at the same time, okay? And even in inset, I can tell it border only, so it actually deletes the inner part automatically, or center only, so it's deleting the border edging.
Wow, that is super cool, Paul. How about one more question because time is running up?
Should see, Shane, you're asking about circular holes tend to distort once there are more than 3 edges. Yeah, because it's probably you're adding an edge, so it no longer can keep it. It's not a perfect circle anymore. And then I add more edge loops. Yeah. So here, let me make something that's doing what you're encountering. So let me run this guy. Well, no, I don't want to save my beautiful artwork. Okay, so if I insert an edge here, okay, so I insert an edge loop and I insert an edge loop, right? And if I go here to point, and then now I do a split point, right, like this, and let's not do grid, let's do smooth, so it stays round, right? So of course this gives us the capabilities to do, hey, let's do this, let's do an inset, but not on each polygon, just on the region, and then let's inset that in on a single polygon. So I'll inset that in, right? And then now maybe I want to crease that, border only, polygroup all. Now it's got that crease, right? And now I can do this, and let's Q-mesh it, single poly, down, but let's hold the shift key so it creates a little bit of a bubble there. And then let's do this, and then now let's crease it up. Okay, so it's still looking relatively circular, right? The problem is if you start to now add an edge loop here, right, it can't stay circular. Geometry-wise, that's not a perfect circle either, so it can't stay a perfect circle. There's nothing really we can do about that. That's just the way geometry is working, right? So if you start adding edge loops in there, you're pulling now. There's an additional edge loop there, so it doesn't pull the same way from one vertex point to another vertex point because now there's another vertex point added in there. There's not really anything we can do about that. Is that?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Your question? Is that what you were looking for, Shane? So it's just, yeah, you start getting clever and you're getting creative with it. Is what you start to do. So let's see if there's any last-minute question here.
I think we're running out of time, Paul. I'm sorry to be the bad guy. No,
well, that's it. I guess that's it for our time.
Yes, I'm sorry. This was spectacular. I think you need to have your own show every week. I would be, one happy customer.
I do have an online class coming up for UArtsy. If anybody really wants to take a class and really listen to my bad jokes on a regular basis, bless your heart.
Oh, do tell. Where is it?
Working on the Gundams. In that class, everyone's going to create like a Gundam or some kind of mech head. So we're going to be using the ZModeler brush to do ArrayMeshes and NanoMeshes and stuff. So I'll show you guys the piece that I'm making for that class, and then we're also going to be doing the pilot for the Gundam as well. So I'm going to do like a pinup girl challenge, I think, in the class. It'll be fun. So I'm going to be, it starts next month. I actually have a free webinar coming up, actually, UArtsy on Saturday for another hour. So uartsy.com is where you'd want to go. I'll be teaching a 10-week course. Knowing me, it'll end up being longer because I like to talk about nothing and just silly jokes, and I also encourage the students and people, hey, give me stuff, and then a lot of times we'll get on tangents for half an hour just on something that a particular person's working on because it helps everyone.
Well, you're definitely a great entertainer, Paul. You're not just talented, ZBrush trainer. You're just pure entertainment, super fun. I'm sorry, I have to take the screen back.
Let me show them. So
oh yes, of course. Sorry.
And then let me answer the question for Misha.
Yes.
Yeah, you can import models from Rhino, but it has to be polygons. We don't accept NURBs. We're not a NURB-based application like Rhino. So you would need to use T-splines, right, to convert it to polygons. It has to be polygons. So we don't accept anything from NURB-based systems. Sorry, it's loading all my undo history. Sorry, it's taking so long.
That's all right.
Then you can have the screen back.
I'll take it.
Let's go marathon, man. The rest of the day, let's do this. Holy moly, I got a lot of undos. So obviously undos, there's 10,000 per subtool, and I don't even remember how many subtools I have on this thing. So that one's got over 3,000 undos. Sorry, there's no, I could stop it, but
that's all right. It's loading. I can see.
We need like waiting music when files load. I want sound effects too in ZBrush.
That's a great idea. That is a great idea.
It'd be good times. Have some fun with the button. Don't do that. Don't press that button. Press this button.
Now that would be a show. Or maybe next webinar we'll come up with some sound effects and special.
I should skip one of these. Sorry.
No problem. I think everybody's still hanging on, so glue to the chair, everyone. Don't move. It's coming.
What are those big dancing balls? What are those big balls you used to do with? Those are good to sit on, right? I hope your back out. There we go. Finally loaded. Holy moly. So here's my Gundam head that I'm working on for that class. So what we're going to be doing is going through how I made all this, the steps, the process I made. So I'm probably going to end up doing the whole Gundam, so I'm keeping the inner part hollow because I'm going to do all the guts inside so the pieces actually pop off and you can see inside the guts. So my challenge to the students is, hey, let's all create a Gundam. So I still got to put the lights there, finish this off, and then finish the light off on the back, and then I'm going to make the shoulder piece. So this is what we'll be showing how to make and how I did. And this is all ZModeler. It's all the ZModeler brush. I'm going to show the technique I did to China to make this. So you can go ahead and take the screen back now.
Okay.
They have an idea.
Thank you, Paul. So to be continued for, if you want to hang out more with Paul's great presentation, that's your chance. So can you see my screen now? I think here I am. Okay. Yep. I would like to, first of all, to thank Paul for this exciting presentation, and thank you all for attending from the Novage team. I want to remind you to visit our page at novage.com and check out ZBrush Release 7. After this webinar, I don't know, you can keep your hands off it. I sure can't. Remember that Novage is the best way to buy designer software online, and for information on the latest specials and new releases, join the Novage network on Facebook, Google+, or Twitter. And the upcoming webinar will be Rhino with V-Ray, and it's going to be an engagement ring prototype and render, from building organic and geometric structure, applying pavés, STL creation, and development of a high-quality final render. To rewatch today's webinar or previous one, check out our Novage YouTube and Vimeo channels, our webinar playlist, as webinars for every software taste. Thanks again for joining us from wherever you were, Narnia, Westeros, King's Landing, and or LA. And have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much, Paul, and see you next time.
Yeah, thank you. And Greg is asking for a link. I gave you guys the urcd.com. They're probably going to be putting on. They're not advertising yet. They're going to be starting advertising on Saturday. But if you join their newsletter or whatever, they're advertising giving you guys the link to the webinar I'm doing on Saturday morning.
Okay, just keep your eyes open. Okay, thank you so much.
Have a wonderful evening.
You too, bye.
Bye, guys.